What's up, guys? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. Get my six. Get my six and mine and mine. All right. Major announcement on this beautiful, glorious October morning. Of course, it's an October night by the time you're watching this video. Nina Petrie from the great state of West by God, Virginia, is our first winner in our contest we're having between now, every evening through November 1, Day of the Dead. You submit your true, real experience with the paranormal, supernatural, anything cryptid, UFOs, aliens, alien abductions, etc., all things weird, to the channel. Give us permission to use it, and either telling it on the channel or publishing it in True Hauntings Volume 2, which is set to be out in November, to the email address crazylake@mail.com, and you will be entered into our daily drawing. We had many submissions last night. Thank you. If you're not Nina Petrie and you didn't win today, you might win tomorrow or the next day. We got a week to go, folks. And if we have success with this, we'll continue this going forward. Nina mentioned in her comments that she wanted one of these. These are hand carved. I made these with my carving knives. A couple hours worth of work each, even though it might not look like it because they're small. This one was carved out of poplar, taken from a limb on our property. This was carved out of basswood. Nina, you mentioned you would like one of these. Email us back on the channel, crazylake@mail.com. Let us know which one. Do you want the one that's more rounded, made out of poplar, or do you want the one that's a little more squared, made out of basswood? Whichever you choose, we will mail out to you tomorrow, the day after receiving your email. So, folks, if you want to know what you can win, and if you have a preference, if you do win and you want to state in your email which you prefer, go to our Etsy store. The link is in the description box below, and you can see what we have available there. Those will be unlisted, so they won't be there anymore. So if you see it, you have access to it. Submit your story with permission to use, and tell us what you want, and we'll mail it to you for free as a way of saying thanks for giving us another spooky tale to tell in November. Now, that's the major announcement. Now it's time to get to the meat and potatoes of the story. It's in regard to one of the ugliest aspects of modern American society that unfortunately seems to have spread worldwide in recent years, even in places where there aren't guns allowed, like Thailand, England, mass shootings. When these things happen, be they at a public gathering like the Vegas shooting a few years back, or be it in the most hideous of places at a school where children are the victims, we all find ourselves asking, what is it that happens in the life of someone to create such a monster who would carry out such a monstrous act, right? And excuse me as I drink fluids throughout the course of this manifesto. We have a written manifesto from one of these monsters that I'm going to read you today. I'll have to hydrate, though. I just did my morning run. And the reason I'm doing the video in the morning instead of in the evening is because it's just so beautiful the way the sun is shining on all those orange, yellow, crimson leaves. So, at any rate, with no further ado, this might answer that question. What is it that takes place in the life of someone to become so monstrous, to commit such a monstrous act, such a heinous act of hate and violence? And here we go, October 24, Shooter's Manifesto. Well, it's official. I've been rotting away in this cell for 3 years now. It's a letter from prison, folks. I know, because they locked me up on Halloween, and here we are at Halloween again. No, they don't allow me to keep a calendar or a clock or anything like that. But there's a guard that's nice enough to come around each Halloween and sneak us all a piece of candy. I got a Tootsie Roll this time, just like the last 2 years. I've got a slit cut into the bottom of my mattress where I keep their wrappers. I know that 3 years isn't hard to remember, even though those 3 years have felt like an eternity. But I know I'll lose count someday, because I'm only 23 years old, and since, well, I can't get my hands on booze or drugs or anything else otherwise unhealthy, and since I exercise religiously for an hour a day, every day, since it's the only thing I have to do for the hour they let me out of my cell each day, other than for meals and a shower, I know I'll probably live to see 100, and in time, I'll need those wrappers to keep count of the years. Ironically, it was also Halloween when I killed all those people. Yes, I did it. I've never claimed my innocence, and as a matter of fact, I pled guilty at trial. My state-appointed attorney tried to get me off on reason of insanity, but then there was that 11th hour piece of evidence that came up in court that no one was ready for. Least of all me. Sure, my lawyer tried to get it stricken from the record, and the judge even told the court reporter to strike it from the record, and all that sounds and looks good on paper, but the jurors were already made aware of it, and, well, like they say in all those clickbait social media posts, once seen, it cannot be unseen. So yes, I admit it. I, Aiden P. Givens, the notorious Sycamore State College killer, did willfully and wantonly walk into the psychology classroom of one Professor Stephen B. Nichols, Ph.D., on the evening of 31 October 2019, Halloween night, actually, since the sun had already set, and I did willfully and wantonly shoot and kill one Professor Stephen B. Nichols, Ph.D., as well as every single one of his 27 students in attendance, one of which was my older sister, making me the killer responsible for the largest mass school shooting in world history. Only after, of course, having stopped by my mom's house and killing her first. Why did I do it? Did I do it to be notorious? Absolutely not. And sure, I guess you could say I'm merely a product of my generation gone nightmare, and I'll get into that in a bit, but that's not the reason either. You could say I was angry and that I had an axe to grind, and I was out for revenge that I was going to make everyone pay, even people had nothing to do with the reasons I was out for revenge. Sure, that's all part of it, but that's not the primary reason. You could even blame the guns I used, but hell, there's no need for that. The mainstream media and every single member of a particular political party already covered all that, but I can tell you, it wasn't the fault of the guns I used. I did it because I thought, oh hell, why not? What do I have to lose? And at the time, I really had nothing to lose. I was literally a dead man walking. But then in court, when that 11th hour evidence came out, I realized I had the next 70 to 80 years to lose, and well, here I am losing them. Okay, look, I'll start at the beginning. I guess you could say I've never been one in possession of much drive. I've always been what you might call incorrigible, unable to be motivated. As a child, I had no goals or ambitions, unless of course you count getting to the next level on whatever video game I spent endless hours playing after school or on the weekends, or years later in my early adulthood, while mom and dad were at work, and I was supposed to be out looking for a job, but stayed home instead to play said video games. Like I said in the beginning, I'm kind of a product of my generation, Generation Z. And no one seemed to mind until I hit that magic age of 18. All of a sudden, my very parents, who'd made life so easy for me, expected me to just get up and go to college? Or go out and get a job if I didn't want to go to college? And it didn't help that I had an older sister who did both. That bitch was always showing off, finishing third in her class and making the all-state girls basketball team her senior year when she led the team to the state finals. The only silver lining on that black cloud for me was the fact that they lost in overtime, and I got to watch the self-centered, overachieving bitch cry the whole ride home. We have a couple of gray squirrels fighting in a tree over there. That's what you're hearing. They're not fighting. They're doing something else. I would have liked to say that the big loss in the state finals basketball game took the wind out of my sister's sails, but no, it didn't. The following year, she had to go off to Sycamore State College on a full scholarship. I'll point out, not athletic, but academic, and get nothing but A's, not just in the first semester, but in her entire first year. And then the year after that, and the year after that. Anyway, Dad didn't say too much the year after I graduated from high school and didn't go off to college because Mom had pretty much henpecked him into place, at least in regard to me, my whole life. Yeah, I guess you could say I was Mom's favorite, but isn't that usually the case? Girls are always daddy's little girls, and boys, well, I don't want to call myself a mama's boy, but if the shoe fits. The problems at home started, I guess, when I wouldn't go out and get a job. Dad kept his mouth shut, as he knew he needed to do for the sake of keeping the peace with Mom for a while. But sometime after Christmas of that first year of me being home after high school, he started saying stuff. Not to me at first. Oh, he knew better than that. Mom would have thrown him out. But I could hear them talking downstairs while I was up in my room playing video games on one browser and watching porn on another. It's getting embarrassing, Dad would say to Mom. I mean, the guys at work are always like, so what about Aiden? He working yet? Planning on going to college next fall? I mean, what am I supposed to tell him? Gee, Tom, Mom would say, and not nearly as softly as Dad had spoken, you could tell them to mind their own fucking business. You see, Mom was always in my corner. At least she always had been. That's why she had to be the first to go there at the end. But I don't want to rush the story. As time went on, and I stayed home, unemployed, and definitely not college-bound, things got worse between Mom and Dad finally walked out. He still paid the bills, or at least his part of them. I guess my parents had always kept separate bank accounts, because Mom had always been a strong, independent woman. But Dad just couldn't take it anymore. I guess I was too much of an embarrassment for him, and he got tired of Mom's enabling me, as he always put it, so he finally left. But whatever. That had nothing to do with me. I didn't have to leave. But things changed when the divorce was final, about a year after that. I guess Dad's lawyer was better than Mom's, and it was decided in divorce court that Dad would not have to pay alimony, even though his income was considerably higher than Mom's. And since my sister and I were already grown, there would be no child support. But if you think this all sucked for Mom, let me tell you, it sucked even more for me. Because after about 2 months of Mom living on her own, well, and with me up in my room playing video games and watching porn, and being completely financially responsible for everything, she started coming down on me about doing something with my life. Like I said, the way I'd lived my life was just fine until all of a sudden I'm grown up. I mean, how can parents just throw these expectations on their children like this, from out of nowhere? Mom, I told her, just go find some guy to date and then get remarried. Replace Dad's income. That's what all your friends have done. Look at your friend Linda, who lives down the road. She hates her new husband, and she doesn't even try to hide it. She's always looking for places to go and things to do just to get away from him. But he contributes financially, so she stays married to him. Why don't you just do the same thing? Because nobody wants to date a woman who has a grown-ass man-child living upstairs, playing video games and watching porn all hours of the night and sleeping all hours of the day, she said. And I could hardly believe the words that had come from her mouth. She'd never spoken to me like that before. To speed this story up, she ended up giving me an ultimatum. She said I either needed to get a job or go to college. Hell, I figured college was easier than working. That's why all those deadbeat Gen Xers from her generation stayed in college and got all those advanced degrees, most of who have never used them, just so they could put off having to join the workforce for as long as possible. So college it would be for me. And since Sycamore State College was local, I figured I'd just go there. Mom filled out the application online for me. I wasn't going to put forth the effort to do it. I was quickly accepted. Being a straight C student in the high school had paid off after all. In the following fall, I started college. Mom was so proud of me for taking initiative, as she called it. I chose not to point out that she had forced initiative upon me. She even went with me 3 weeks before the semester started in order to meet my advisor and set up my classes. And that's the first time I met that son of a bitch, Professor Stephen B. Nichols, Ph.D. Dr. Nichols was the dean of the psychology department at Sycamore State. I wasn't majoring in psychology or even taking a single class in psychology. I was leaning toward education. So if I actually did end up getting a degree and using it, I'd get 3 months off in the summer and a lot of really long breaks during the rest of the year. But as dumb luck and nothing else would have it, he and my mom really hit it off. I mean, like, literally. Dr. Nichols was about my mom's age, 50, and he was what the little whores from my generation would call daddy. That means even though he was old, he was hot. And damn it, Mom didn't even as much as try to hide the fact that she was interested in him. The appointment was only supposed to last 45 minutes, but after an hour had already gone by, we still had not even started filling out my class schedule because Mom and Dr. Nichols wouldn't stop talking to each other like they were on a first date. Hell, as it turns out, that's exactly what it was, because when we finally had to end the session because the next student had arrived for their appointment and was waiting not so patiently in the hall, Mom asked Dr. Nichols if he'd like to come to our place that evening for dinner, during which time we could arrange my schedule. Of course, the old perv said yes, and well, that night, that's what happened. Daddy Dr. Nichols came to our place, and he'd already organized my schedule, by the way, and he handed it to me the minute he walked in the door, treating me from that moment on like an afterthought. And then we all had dinner, and the whole time he and Mom acted like I wasn't even there. Oh, hell, I thought. Maybe she'll take my advice and hook up with the guy, and I'll be able to drop out of this stupid college thing after a semester or so anyway. To speed things up for you again, since I'm the one with all the time and you're probably not, that's exactly what happened. Well, at least at first. Dr. Nichols started banging my mom the very first night he'd come to dinner. At first, I thought I'd forgotten to mute my computer while I was watching porn, but when I checked it and I saw that I had indeed muted it, that's when I realized what was going on down the hall. With these squirrels over there. And they were on each other like a couple of people my age from that point on. Well, I guess you could say at least like a couple of people my age from a previous generation. You see, us Gen Zers don't quite sow the oats the same way the generations before us did because, hell, even that takes more energy than we're willing to spend. I ended up going to most of my classes most of the time. I had no idea that you could actually get kicked out of class and given an F for excessive absences, but I soon found out. I hated my English 101 class because the professor expected me to read all these classic novels. I mean, I'd already seen most of the movies based on the novels, so I didn't see the need to read the books, and I didn't read the books. And when I'd go to class and that bitch professor, Dr. Roxworthy, would ask me about the book, and I told her my views, at least based on what I'd seen in the movie based on the book, she'd ask me even more questions. Questions I couldn't answer about shit like theme and plot development and all this other shit I didn't understand or even care about. And when I couldn't answer, she'd start accusing me of having watched the movie and never having read the book. I told her, why in the hell would I waste my time reading the book when I could just watch the movie? All those other kids in class laughed like I was joking, but I wasn't. Bunch of smart-ass pricks, let me tell you. Half of them in there had been in Professor Nichols' class the night I shot it up. So they had it coming to them for laughing at me in English 101. I wish Dr. Roxbury had been in his class that night, giving Dr. Nichols some kind of message or something. I would have gotten her too. Oh well. Anyway, I stopped going to class, except for on test day, and I'd actually passed the test because I'd seen the movies. And I guess the movies had been close enough to the books that I actually knew most of the information for the test. And that bitch couldn't stand it, so she kicked me out for excessive absences and handed me an F. Well, I wasn't going to stand for that. I went straight to Dr. Nichols' office and told him to fix it. He gave me some line about how it was out of his control. Bullshit, I told him. You're the dean of a freaking department at this college. Yeah, he said, but not Dr. Roxworthy's department. And I wouldn't do anything about this if it had happened in my department, Aiden, he continued. The easiest thing you'll ever have to do in your life is go to class while you're in college. Let me tell you, when you graduate and get out into the real world, you'll look back and see. You'll wish the real world was as easy as college. That son of a bitch. Here he was, laying the pipe to my mother, and yet claiming he couldn't do anything about that bitch English 101 teacher giving me a damn F for skipping class. Let's just say his name was very quickly moving its way to the top of my list. It had made its way onto the list by laying said pipe to said mother in the first place. But what he did next, without question, put him at the top of the list. Well, just below Mom's. Aiden, Mom said one morning when I'd come downstairs after waking up somewhere around 2 in the afternoon. I'd just woken up because I'd been up all night playing Call of Mission. I was really killing it in the game, and no way was I going to stop with the run I was having. Yeah, I said, making my way past her and Dr. Nichols, both of whom were sitting on the couch. They'd just finished a late lunch, I guess, early breakfast if you ask me. There was a fire in the fireplace and the Christmas tree was lit up. It was sometime between Christmas and New Year. We were in between semesters. You need to sit down and listen, Dr. Nichols said, raising his voice so I could hear him while I was pissing in the downstairs bathroom off from the kitchen. Great, I thought. Another lecture about how I'm supposed to raise the lid, yada yada. But I was wrong. Way wrong. Your mother and I are getting married, Dr. Nichols said after I'd gone into the living room and taken a seat. What? I said, incredulous. Isn't it great, Aiden? Mom said, and she looked at me in a way that I could tell she was hoping I'd keep my mouth shut about the advice I'd given her about remarrying to replace the second income she'd lost when Dad had left her. Sure, I told her to do it, but I didn't think she'd actually do it. I mean, how could she place some random dude above me? Another thing, Dr. Nichols said, you're not college material. It's best you don't waste your time and any more of your mother's money going back this spring. But I've already got my classes lined up, I said, and who the fuck are you to say anything about what my mom does with her money? My future husband, Mom said, jumping in and sounding like she had a set of balls. I'd not heard her use that tone of voice since she used it on Dad, and she'd never used it on me. Well, except that one time she'd given me that ultimatum that got us here in the first place. Another thing, Dr. Nichols said, since you won't be attending college, you need to get a job. And you need to get your own place to stay. No more freeloading. Who in the actual fuck do you think you are? I said, and I jumped to my feet like I was actually going to do something. But then Dr. Nichols stood, and, well, I guess I left out the part about him being a former Army Ranger who'd served twice in Iraq and once in Afghanistan, so, yeah, I sat the fuck back down. What I'm trying to say, Mike, I said. Mike was Dr. Nichols' first name, and he always insisted I call him that, but I saw no need to do so until now. Now that I viewed as doing so, maybe giving me a bit of leverage. Is that you've got to understand. My mother and I have this really codependent thing going on between us. I mean, she has enabled me to get to this point. I have never been codependent or an enabler, Mom said. I've been a sucker. Then she turned toward Dr. Nichols and she said, did I say that right, honey? Yes, dear, you said it exactly right, he said, and that's when I knew he'd told her to say that shit. I won't bore you with the drama that went down after all that. I'll just tell you what I did about it, and well, you'll understand why I did what I did and why I'm here, celebrating my third straight Halloween in prison. I asked my sister if I could live with her, but that was a no-go. She and her live-in boyfriend said they didn't need a dependent going into their final semester of college. She said they already had plans for graduate school and they were not going to allow me to fuck those plans up. Like I explained earlier, she was nothing but an overachieving, self-centered bitch. I knew not even to ask Dad if I could stay with him. He'd always tried to turn me into what he calls a real man, but Mom always stopped him. Well, I figured without her in my corner now to stop him, that son of a bitch would probably try to charge me rent and make me obey a stupid set of rules like curfews and bedtimes. I couldn't find a place on my own at first for several months, actually, and it was really uncomfortable being at home because it was so obvious that I was not wanted. And it was not so much that I couldn't find my own place because I didn't have references. I mean, all the landlords and apartment managers I talked to were willing to take my age and the fact that I'd never lived away from home into consideration. But the fact that I didn't have a permanent job was what hurt me. So yeah, I finally went out and got one. I'd tempt here and there for the sake of keeping Mike and Mom off my back to a degree and hoping they'd change their mind about this job nonsense, but they didn't. So I finally buckled down and got something permanent in order to secure my adobe. Who would have thought there was so much to this adulting bullshit? Anyway, I ended up taking a job as a coal miner down at the local Shaft 66. Oh, I knew mining was hard work, but I had no plans of keeping the job for long. You see, I knew that once Mom saw what a hard, dangerous, life-threatening job I'd gone out and gotten, she'd come to my rescue. Why, she'd kick that overeducated grunt out of our house and invite me back in. Strangely, though, after starting my job, I was finding that I actually liked the job and that I enjoyed the physical aspects of it. Shut up. It's a blue jay. Jeez. I'd never excelled in sports. I mean, I played several when I was a little kid, sure. Dad made me. But I wasn't very good because I didn't want to do all the hard work involved with getting better. But since I had no option as a coal miner, it was either do the job or get fired, I had to do it. I couldn't risk getting fired until I'd been here long enough for Mom to feel sorry for me and come to my rescue. Even more strange, after this first month, when I started getting stronger and gaining endurance, I liked the way it made me feel. But then came my physical. I was supposed to have taken the physical before my first day of work, but the foreman thought that since I was so young and seemingly healthy, there was no risk to my health, and that there was no risk of injury as long as I followed the company's well-explained safety regulations. I wouldn't actually take the physical until after I'd already been working in the mines for that first full month. I went in for the physical one day and then right back to work afterward. But the next day when I went to work, the foreman pulled me into his office before I could clock out. "I hate to be the one to tell you this," he told me, "and I ain't never seen anything like this in all my days of mining." But then he trailed off. "What is it, boss?" I asked. "Well," he said, "I guess it happens. You're that 1 in 1 million it's happening to, and, well, I feel bad as all get out," but then he trailed off again. "Just say it," I told him. "Your lungs are all ate up with black lung," he said, just like that. "What?" I said. "How in the hell can I have black lung? I'm 19 years old, and I've been working here for a month. That makes no sense." "It's due to the cancer," a man I didn't know said as he walked into the room to join us. I'd seen him during my physical the day before, but I'd not spoken to him. Turns out he was actually a doctor. A lab tech in training or something like that, some girl my age, had actually given me my physical. "What cancer?" I said, and at that point I sat down. I was starting to feel as if the room were spinning. "Are you a smoker?" the doctor asked. "Does vape count?" I asked. "We don't know yet," the doctor said. "Probably won't for another 10 years. Those things are still so new and all. But I'm afraid you may end up being one of the early unknown guinea pigs. How often do you vape?" "I don't know," I said. Every day, but I don't know how many hits I take. I usually do it to stay up late in order to play video games longer." "Shit, son," the doctor said. He was an old country doctor, and I guess they say stuff like that. "Shit, son. I'm afraid your lungs are all ate up with cancer and black lung. If I were a betting man, I'd say you've got less than 6 months to live." Well, that hit me really hard. Literally. Sure, I still had no life plans or ambitions, but damn, who is supposed to get news like that when they're 19 years old? Well, they say that when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And that's exactly what I plan to do. If I was going to die in less than 6 months, I was going to make every motherfucker who had a hand in me coming down here to get this black lung shit and cancer pay. Sure, I'd taken the job in the mines, but only because I'd been forced to. And yeah, I chose to hit those vape pipes, but Mom knew I was doing it, and she didn't make me stop. Hell, she was the one that bought them for me, even when Dad directly told her not to. And that's why I did what I did. I went and took care of Mom first, just to get her out of the way and for having the audacity to replace me with that prick professor. And then I drove up there to the college, and I marched right into Dr. Nichols's class, nay, Mike's class, and I blew him away next. And then my sister, who was in class, because I knew she'd be the one to put up the biggest fight because she'd never put up with any of my shit. And then I just started blazing away at all the rest of the students. I'll save you the gory details from this point on because you've probably already seen them all over and over and over again in the news, no doubt. Anyway, I just dropped my guns and waited on the cops when I was done. Like they said in the news, I had 3 guns, all legal and registered, and all family hand-me-downs. And not a single one of the 3 whispered in my ear and told me to do it. It was all my choice. I knew I was going to be dead in a matter of months, so I didn't even try to come up with an excuse for having done what I've done, other than the real reason at trial. Mom and Dr. Nichols had expected me to man up and get a job and get my own place. After telling me I wasn't college material, and my sister wouldn't even let me, her only brother, nay, her only sibling, live with her. And all those other kids, like I said, half of them had laughed at me in English 101. I'm sure the other half had laughed at me somewhere sometime for something. My state-appointed defender was trying to get me off on reason of insanity, and it looked like things were actually going well for him. I mean, you'd have to admit that anyone who did what I did was insane. I still stuck to my story, however, because it was true. And I looked those jurors right in the eyes when I told them that I did what I did fully on purpose with full knowledge of what I was doing because I knew I was dying of both cancer and black lung anyway, so why the hell not? But then came the 11th hour piece of evidence. The prosecutors submitted the results from my physical. I knew this would prove that I'd been honest from the beginning and that it didn't matter if I was convicted or not because either way I was going to die. Yes, they do have the death penalty in my state, but I knew the cancer and black lung would take me out first. However, it turned out my foreman and doctor had read me the results from the wrong physical. They'd read me the physical results of a 62-year-old man who'd been working at the Shaft 66 for more than 30 years and who'd smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day every single day for every one of those more than 30 years. It turns out he and I had the same first and middle initials and very similar last names. Whereas I am Aiden P. Givens, therefore A.P. Givens, this man's name was Arden P. Given, therefore A.P. Given. Objection! My lawyer screamed when this evidence was introduced. This evidence was never made available to us before trial. Since that was true, the judge told the recorder, like I said at the beginning, to strike that part of the proceedings from the record. But the damage had already been done. And again, all that legal mumbo-jumbo looks good on paper, but as I've said before, and like all the clickbait social media headlines proclaim, once seen, it cannot be unseen. The jurors had the facts. And now they no longer viewed me as insane. They viewed me as a spoiled little rotten mama's boy who didn't want to work for a living and who had gone out and killed a couple of people who had expected me to work for a living, as well as a bunch of innocent people who had nothing to do with it at all. It turns out the mix-up of the physical's findings was a result of human error. The lab tech, or whatever position it was, who delivered the results in error was, you guessed it, a non-attention to detail paying Generation Zer. The girl who'd carried out my physical, rather than the doctor, because she was in training, is the one to blame. I'm sure when she was filing and organizing the paperwork, she was doing so with one hand, while holding her smartphone and scrolling through social media posts or texting someone with her other hand. So, like I said earlier, in more ways than one, you really could say I'm a product of my generation gone nightmare. Times two, really, if you count my part in it and the lab tech's part in it. Needless to say, the jury came back with a unanimous verdict, guilty. And though I begged the judge to execute me, because they do have the death penalty in my state, like I already said, he said that execution would be too easy on me, and he sentenced me to 27 life sentences, one for each of my victims, all to be served consecutively. But hey, like I said earlier, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Sure, there's no multi-browser action for me here, video games on one browser and porn on the other. But the spank tank between my ears is full from all those years of viewing plenty of porn. And I found out that this reading thing, that bitch professor Dr. Roxworthy used to try to get me to do ain't so bad after all. I've actually learned to love it more than I ever did playing video games. I've discovered a pretty neat series of books about Bigfoot Sasquatch, of all things, written by some crazy motherfucker who thinks he actually has got one of those things living in the woods behind his house. I mean, we all know that shit's fake, but it makes for good reading, and the guy seems to be pretty prolific in his writing, so I'm always waiting around anxiously for the next volume of his Bigfoot Sasquatch Files series. And hey, at least I never have to worry about working. Most prisoners have some kind of job here, but the judge thought that would be too good for me, too. So as part of my sentence, I'm not allowed to have a prison job. Ha! That judge thought he was so high and mighty and smart. Turns out he was just another sucker, like my mom was for all those years. Besides, the food in here is free and there's no rent, so I don't need no damn prison job. I'll admit though, each time that guard comes around and gives me my Halloween treat and I start thinking about time, I do get a little down because I have so much of it to go. So if I could give any advice to any of my fellow Gen Zers out there, it wouldn't have anything to do with getting jobs and whatnot. No way, fuck that shit forever. It would be this. I know you've probably heard that revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, maybe not if you're part of Gen Z. I'd actually never heard it until coming here and reading all these books, but I now know this saying. I know the saying now. It was coined originally by a French author named Eugene Sue, by the way, and boy, would Dr. Roxworthy be proud of me. Anyway, after my experience, my advice would be that revenge is a dish best never served. Oh, and by the way, whether you're a Gen Zer or not, happy Halloween. The end. Aiden, great news for you. Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 14 was just made available on Amazon in both print and Kindle. You can get it from the description in the link, or from the link in the description box below, as can everybody else watching. And again, Miss Petrie, let us know in an email which one you want. The roundish one made out of poplar, or the squarish one made out of basswood. See each and every single one of you more tomorrow night for another story and for the announcement of our next winner. You can win as well. Just simply submit your true story of any paranormal, supernatural experiences you've had to the channel. The email address is crazylake@mail.com. Give us permission to use your story either on the channel or in print form, and you can be a winner. See you for more next time.